Greetings from San Diego, California. This interactive multinational teleconference is reaching you live in English and Spanish through a unique and complex international telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. This program brings together distinguished institutions representing education, business, and government in more than a dozen countries in the Americas and Europe. I'm Professor Peter Anderson from the School of Communication here at San Diego State University. Today we'll be covering the topic of the new Multicultural Knowledge Manager. This is the 9th program of the ITC series, Strategies for Competitive Performance. Nearly 50 years ago, Canadian media scholar and guru Marshall McLuhan coined the term global village as a metaphor to describe the international connections created by the electronic age. This was decades before the internet, but McLuhan was prophetic. And now in the era of the World Wide Web, more than ever, we're in a global village. Travel and migration, television and movies, permeable borders and multinational corporations have blurred boundaries and created virtual communities on an international scale. In this global economy, it is no longer sufficient for an effective manager to be ethno-sensitive or to speak several languages. The new multicultural knowledge manager must have a broad understanding and command of the various values, protocols, and aspirations of other cultures. He or she must be competent in the methodology and techniques of commercial diplomacy and must be capable of putting into practice a global perspective in the appraisal, transfer, and negotiation of knowledge within educational, business, or governmental contexts. Our distinguished guest today is Mary Yoko Brannen, a professor of international business at San Jose State University, and associate professor of the executive education program at the University of Michigan Business School. Professor Brannen's expertise in multinational affairs is evident in her research, teaching, and personal background. Born and raised in Japan, having studied in France and Spain, and having worked as a cross-cultural consultant for over 15 years to various Fortune 500 companies, she brings a multifaceted, deep knowledge of today's complex cultural business environment. Her research focuses on ethnographic approaches to the understanding and effects of changing cultural contexts on technology transfer, work organization, and individuals' assumptions regarding work. Professor Brannen's book, Global Meeting Grounds, Negotiating the Complex Cultural Contexts Across Organizations, will be published soon by Oxford University Press. She has published articles in numerous journals, including the Academy of Management Journal, Academy of Management Review, Human Relations, Journal of Management Inquiry, Sam's Business Review, the Handbook of International Management Research, Advances in International and Comparative Management, Business Horizons, Anthropology of Work Review, Practicing Anthropology, and Semiotica. She received her BA in Comparative Literature from the University of California at Berkeley, an MBA with emphasis in international business, and a Ph.D. in organizational behavior with a minor in anthropology from the University of Massachusetts. Welcome, Professor Brannen. Let me ask you this question. It sounds like multinational managers need a large skill set. What sort of education and experience produces a manager that can negotiate the global village?
I think what we need these days is a global mindset, and for that you need experience in other cultures. And also you need quite a lot of adaptability, cross-cultural adaptability.
So that first-hand knowledge of other cultures sounds like it is crucial.
It's critical, yes.
All right, very good. Well, thank you so much for your excellent insights. Now, let's begin with Module 1.
The world as a global village is a convocation used so often that the phrase itself has become a cliché. As such, most of us take for granted much of the outcomes of globalization. We navigate our lives daily through a panoply of cross-cultural choices, such as what nation's food to eat, what foreign film to watch, or what country's fashions to wear. Most of us even quite comfortably intermix foreign words in our daily vocabulary, like when we say something analogous to, it's a Zen sort of thing, or he's a real macho kind of guy. These kinds of effects of globalization do indeed make us wonder about cultural homogenization, and whether there are cultural differences that do in fact matter. Take, for example, this cartoon showing an older couple at a travel agency. Perhaps they are planning their second honeymoon. If they were to use the posters above the travel agent's desk to help them make their decision as to where to go, they might as well flip a coin. Rio, Paris, Tokyo look exactly the same. One important locale where global navigation happens less smoothly is in the transnational firm, or in the context of multinational enterprises. In this setting, the culture, or what we generally define as the taken-for-granted pattern of shared values, expectations, and behaviors developed by a group of people interacting over time, is not so clear. Today's multinational enterprises, characterized by organizational structures incorporating international joint venture or wholly owned subsidiaries in countries throughout the world, reflect not just one, but a myriad of co-located or interdependent complex cultures. And as firms around the globe continue to internationalize, it is in this setting that more and more of us are likely to experience the more poignant effects of the global village. Today's modules go beyond diversity training and language competence to illuminate a qualitatively distinct knowledge base that today's managers must have in order to understand what effects globalization has on home organizations, how cross-cultural interactions unfold in transnational settings, and how complex cultural context affects the transfer of firms' core competencies abroad. Generally, people turn to cross-cultural studies to help them navigate across cultural borders. Cross-cultural studies proliferate in all the social sciences, ranging from anthropology to social psychology and international business. These studies generally share the assumption that, despite globalization of the world economy, differences in thinking and social action exist between people of different nations, and that such differences matter, especially when it comes to executing transnational projects. To fundamentally understand this requires a change of focus. Consider, for example, this bank of vending machines. Vending machines are quite global in their look and application. In fact, it's hard to think of a more globally user-friendly technology. No need to know the local language or things particular to food preferences. Simply identify the product you want, slip in some coins, and presto, your needs are met. But are these machines actually global? Are they basically the same everywhere? To answer, we need to narrow our focus and take a closer look. Whereas the machines are similar in function and design, when we take a deeper look inside of them, for example, at their product offerings, there are some stark differences. Commonplace in Japan, near train stations, in business hotels, and around the town center, these vending machines are stocked with a variety of convenience items, ranging from food, beverage items, to razors, underwear for an unanticipated overnight stay, and even liquor, beer, rice wine, whiskey, in all sorts of sizes, especially large family sizes. Certainly we do not find this in North America. We can assume various things from this difference. Japanese like to drink. There's no legal drinking age in Japan. Japanese don't care about children drinking. Each of these assumptions could lead to serious misperceptions about Japanese people and their culture at large. Rather, alcoholic beverages are sold in vending machines for convenience. Japanese homes have little storage to keep alcohol on hand for guests. In addition, whereas there is a drinking age limit in Japan, it is seldom abused due to heavy social norms and shaming sanctions often found in group-oriented societies. Incidentally, rather than signifying a country of alcoholics, the large bottle sizes found in the vending machines also reflect group-centered interactions. Drinking in such countries is usually done interactively, where friends pour each other's drink, thereby necessitating larger bottles. Whether the transnational activity involves stocking vending machines, crossing borders to negotiate favorable trade policies, ensuring just usages of foreign aid, successfully managing overseas operations, effectively transferring technology, or providing cross-cultural guidance to expatriate individuals and families, people need cultural knowledge. Further, the more people dependent our cross-cultural activities and operations are, the less applicable global rules and norms will be. Thus, global human resource management policies or global dispute resolution methodologies would simply miss their mark without an understanding of cultural idiosyncrasies. With deeper cultural knowledge, on the other hand, today's multicultural managers can understand and even begin to predict, as the case may be, the consequences of their idiosyncratic cross-cultural interactions. The literature to date is quite sophisticated with regard to single culture studies that provide detailed descriptions of the practices, beliefs, and assumptions of disparate national cultures, and comparative studies that elucidate potential areas of cross-cultural dissonance. This type of generalized cultural knowledge provides what I call a billiard ball model of cultural interaction. When we know nothing of the other culture, stereotypical information is useful because it gives us a point of departure in making sense of another culture. The information can tell us where two cultures might either collide with one another, like two hard billiard balls, leading to unsuccessful ventures, or roll parallel to one another, exposing areas of harmony and compatibility. However, such generalized cultural information does not tell us how specific individuals within cultures will perform, or what type of organizational culture might emerge in joint ventures, mergers, or acquisitions between companies representing distinct national cultural groups. In other words, general cultural data serve as good anchors for guiding preliminary cultural encounters, helping us put our best foot forward and not to offend. Although the culture concept is a group-level construct, it is enacted by individuals in different contexts. As such, culture is a multi-leveled construct. Whereas the billiard ball models gives us critical national cultural information, it falls short in explaining how individuals, the innermost level in the diagram you see, with fundamentally different understandings and practices, establish a means of cooperation towards shared goals. Moreover, most cross-cultural interactions are mediated through organizations, the middle level, which, to complicate matters further, have their own cultures. To summarize, there are 4 general limitations of our current understanding of culture in providing an adequate framework for understanding the cultural dynamics of today's complex cultural organizations for the new multicultural knowledge manager. First, our present understanding of culture is parochial. Second, culture, organizational or national, is assumed to be consistent in thought and behavioral manifestations across a specified cultural grouping of individuals. Third, there is no understanding of the interface between national culture and organizational culture. And fourth, cultures are seen as static, not allowing for the reinterpretation and cultural evolution over time and experience. In today's modules, I deal with these issues head-on by advancing the conceptual models of negotiated culture and recontextualization. We will attend to negotiated culture in this first module and recontextualization in the second. By negotiated culture, I mean an ongoing, emergent, working arrangement of imperfectly shared rules and routines. Imperfect because in the post-Cold War era, when interactions between cultures are less hegemonic, existing arrangements are frequently changing, conditions are less certain, and actors have more influence over transnational outcomes. As a result, cooperative arrangements do not evolve along predetermined formula. Emergent working cultures do not simply reflect one or the other culture. Neither are they a blend or hybrid of the constituent best practices, nor representative of some global universal work culture. Rather, cross-cultural actors are frequently faced with situations where no a priori repertoires exist. And so they create ones that are particularistic to the cross-cultural context at hand. In other words, given culture A and B, the negotiated cultural outcome will neither be simply A or B, nor even AB. Some other outcome, more like a mutation containing parts of both cultures as well as some aspects of its own making, idiosyncratic to its own context, will be the result. Even though negotiated cultural outcomes may not be determinable because, by definition, they are in flux, the processes by which shared working cultures evolve have common and perhaps universal elements. A fresh understanding of culture is needed that addresses the limitations I have underscored. This understanding must first address the issue of cultural embeddedness, indicated by the stacked heads in the cultural levels diagram. Again, there are many layers of cultural embeddedness. The most obvious levels are the ones I've just mentioned: national, organizational, and individual. Other layers that often come into play in organizational settings are occupational, industrial, and subcultural groupings. Our own national cultural level is the one we have the most information on from studies in comparative management such as those by Geert Hofstede, Franz Trompenauers, and Mesnevsky, Lane, and Di Stefano, as well as anthropological studies such as those by Klakon and Strodbeck, and comparative psychology models such as the work by Harry Triandis. Whereas these studies provide much useful data at the aggregate national cultural level, it is important to point out that national cultures are hosts for many subcultures. Even in a country like Japan, which is seen as having one of the most homogeneous of national cultures, there are several well-populated subcultures: Korean, Chinese, and Ainu, the indigenous Japanese people, to mention the three largest groups. The organizational cultural level is important to distinguish because even though two firms might share the same national cultural origins, their organizational cultures can be quite distinct, even within the same industry. Think of the cultural differences between Apple Computer and IBM, for example, or Sony and Matsushita in Japan. Sony, the renegade, and Matsushita, the typical Japanese organization that plans for 100 years out in the future. Or Toyota and Honda. Toyota that brought its Japanese management practices to the United States completely intact, and Honda that went out of its way to run an American-like organization in Marysville. At the individual level, people exhibit a range of personal fit with their national and organizational cultures of origin, reflecting their ongoing particular cultural histories in various contexts and subgroup combinations. Therefore, individuals exhibit national cultural attributes ranging from those that might be considered marginal within a given national culture to those that would be considered hypernormal or embodying mainstream national cultural attributes to a very strong degree. Sometimes these differences are generational. See, for example, the differences in style of this traditional mother and teenage son. The mother is wearing a kimono, and the son is sitting cross-legged in jeans. In other words, individuals navigate and situate themselves in organizational settings by taking hypernormal, normal, or marginal normal stances in terms of a given cultural dimension. For these reasons, aggregate cultural descriptions, represented by the portion of the normal curve 2 standard deviations from the mean, may not be representative of organizational cultures, nor the cultures of origins of the individuals who make up the organization. Thus, a given national or organizational culture will always be an imperfect mirror reflection of the other. Another way to define culture that encourages a more dynamic and interconnected understanding is to see culture as learned help system. Again, whereas culture is a group-level phenomenon, it is enacted by individuals who represent varied degrees of connection with the general cultural attributes. Individuals take with them into cultural interactions their own system of help. H stands for habits that determine the unconscious shared behaviors of people in a cultural group. E for expectations that represent the tacit shared understandings. L for language, both verbal and nonverbal. And P for perspective, that governs how we understand both ourselves and others. As we discussed earlier, we make sense of things we see and experience in other cultures, such as alcohol and vending machines, through our own cultural lenses. This can lead us to make erroneous assumptions about the other culture. Our perceptions are governed by our cultural perspective, and this affects both our actions and our interpretations of what we are seeing and experiencing. As an example of perceptual relativity, consider this data attesting to how others see Americans. This slide lists 2 distinct cultural groups, cultures A and B, descriptions of a third American cultural group. These descriptions were collected at the end of a 2-year period of the 3 groups working with one another. Each national cultural group was asked to list the key cultural attributes of the other 2 groups. This slide shows the results of Group A and Group B's interpretation of the U.S. group's culture. Even though each group is describing the same American team, the descriptions are completely distinct. Culture A is Brazilian and Culture B is English. With such ambiguousness and cultural relativity, one might ask, how are we to anticipate whether or what kind of a shared work culture might be possible in today's complex cultural organizational settings? Or why even bother with understanding culture at all? In order to answer this effectively, we need to place culture in context. This slide, adapted from Nadler and Tishman, shows the organization that, within the hexagon, in the larger context of its external environment. In order for the organization to make effective use of its core competencies in the context of its external operating conditions, each part of this model must be in a type of punctuated equilibrium. Culture enters into this picture in 2 places. Once, as national culture, part of the external environment, along with the historical, political, economic, legal inputs. The second time, as the organizational culture, a part of the internal organizational balance. Whereas this slide shows the cultural context for one organization, in today's global marketplace, organizations are characterized by multiple cultures, incorporated into the hexagon of the organization. When members from 2 distinct national and organizational cultures come together, a negotiated culture emerges. As discussed, the negotiated culture that emerges will not be a blend or hybrid culture, though it will be related to the national cultures of origin as represented as an input to the organization. It will not reflect one or the other culture in its entirety. The organizational culture, that which is marked culture within the hexagon, will be a negotiated entity that needs to be in balance or congruent with the other internal aspects of the organization. Again, given culture A and B, the negotiated cultural outcome will be neither A nor B nor AB, but some other outcome, more like a mutation, containing both parts of both parents, as well as some aspects of its own idiosyncratic making. An organization that is the result of an international merger or acquisition, such as an international joint venture, then, is a contested terrain where groups compete to assert their norms and practices. Firms have more control over affecting the conditions within the micro arena of the organization, rather than those that are in the field. Those aspects in the contextual or macro environment outside of the organization, such as the political and legal environment, national or regional culture, the language spoken, the demographics of the region, are more stable and are generally non-negotiable. Managers have more influence over aspects of organization internal to the arena of the firm, such as the venture structure, organizational rules, and norms. Many individuals in today's complex cultural organizations are what we call cultural hybrids. These individuals have learned at least 2 cultural help systems. As such, these individuals provide valuable resources in negotiating merged organizational cultures, as cultural brokers, as it were. They can help managers find collaborative spaces of potential synergy that can become the foundation for the emergent negotiated culture. There are several possible negotiated outcomes. These include compromise by one group. For example, from my own research of a German-Japanese joint venture located in Germany, I found German managers foregoing vacations due to them by their external legal environment during the first 2 years of operations of a newly formed international joint venture, and Japanese managers not expecting to socialize after work with their German counterparts. Another type of negotiated outcome is meeting in the middle. I found that meetings were shorter and less frequent than the Japanese norm, and longer and more frequent than the German norm. Also, I found that participation was pared down for the Japanese. A third type of negotiated outcome involves innovating something new for both groups. In my research, I found an English language norm with an allowance for breakouts into mother tongues when necessary to expedite understanding. This joint venture was also characterized by the emergence of a proactive reporting structure with the Japanese parent company available to facilitate a faster decision-making loop. A fourth type of negotiated outcome involves a division of labor reducing further negotiations. Again, in this research, I found Japanese